Hey Tim, look at this.
Needs work.
Hey Tim, how about this?
Still needs work.
Darn it. How about this?
Nice, high five.
Hey there everybody, how's it going?
My name's Tim.
And my name's Michael.
And you're watching the TMI show.
That's the Tim and Michael Information Show. I like this sort of Maroomba thing we were doing. Today we're doing something a little different, a show review.
Yes.
As mentioned previously, I was in a show, The Last Days of Judas Iscariot, by Stephen Adley Gurgis.
Intense show.
Thank you.
Intense show.
Thank you. Yeah, for those who don't know this show, I was talking to Marshall the other day, and I tried explaining it to him, and it sort of just came out. I said, it's sort of like a few good men met Liar Liar, met the Passion of the Christ in context, and had a play. Because it's a courtroom drama, and the brief description on the back, set in a time-bending, darkly comic world between heaven and hell, The Last Days of Judas Iscariot re-examines the plight and fate of the New Testament's most infamous and unexplained sinner. I love the show. My class first did it for my Acting D repertoire class, which was an advanced acting class where you take your entire class, you choose 3 shows, and the same class does all 3 shows. My class did Medea, the Greek tragedy by Euripides, The Diary of Anne Frank, and this show, which our instructor, Chuck, just brought in reading one day, you know, as he was just sort of coming through. And then we were still trying to choose our 3rd show, and then we're like, what are you reading? And he's like, well, this is a wonderful little show called The Last Days of Judas Iscariot. And then we're like, what's it about? And then I think he might have read something from it. And then we were so excited. And even though it sounded a little blasphemous at some points, but we were so jazzed. And they said, I didn't bring this in for you to all do. And we're like, we don't care, let's do it. Yeah. And so we did it. I've since seen another Acting D class do it, and then we just did it. And so I wanted to have a little interview.
Sounds good.
With Mr. Tim Higley, because you came to see, and so we're just going to walk you through. So how did you hear about the show?
I heard about the show from yours truly.
Oh, well, you know, so did you have any preconceived notions of the show before going in?
I didn't. The title does reveal a bit about the show, The Last Days of Judas Iscariot, and we're all very familiar with Judas Iscariot, who Judas Iscariot is. Also, the posters that Michael was sending out had sort of this subway motif, this dark.
Yeah, we can throw it up.
Motif. Yeah, definitely.
Boom. There it is.
Whoa, you owe me a Coke again. So you kind of get the idea that this is maybe not quite what you're expecting. You have this biblical character in a more contemporary setting, and you're like, this could go really wild. And as it turns out, the show is set in purgatory, as depicted as a New York City underground subway station, which is interesting. And purgatory, for if you don't know, it's, I believe, a Catholic notion, sort of an in-between place between heaven and hell, where those who are on their way to heaven work off their sins. So that's where this takes place. In addition to being contemporary, there's a lot of more historical figures and contemporary characters brought in, like the mother of St. Augustine, St. Monica, there is Sigmund Freud in there, and so it's really just a very wide palette of characters, which is really interesting. Mr. Michael Ornelas here plays Judge Cunningham, you said?
No, Judge Cunningham.
No, I'm sorry, that was the ginger.
Yeah, yes, no, Littlefield,
yeah.
but I said the name Cunningham for so much that it's not uncommon. Somebody told me in the middle of rehearsals too, I love the way you say Cunningham, and I said, why? How do I say it? I didn't realize I was saying it. So now the wonderful thing that I love about having a colleague that knows so much about things that I don't know is he gets to introduce me to different things, and I also feel like maybe sometimes I get to do the same. I know that you've seen probably a few more theater shows than you've probably seen in the past since we've been collaborating on projects together. And I remember you came to our festival a year ago.
Director Fest, which was wonderful.
Thank you. Yes. But I also know that I can't account for the other shows. I can only account for my own. So you did ask me, because as you saw in the poster, it said mature themes and language. And I do remember in an email you said...
I kind of raised my hackles, I'm like,
Yeah, because you saw some things that, and I forgot what you even saw at Directors Festival, but, I can only apologize so much for something that I didn't do, because everybody's an artist. But I stressed so much to Tim, and for anybody else that wants to give this show a read, make sure it's in frame, that it is that good and wonderful, at least as far as reading it. I loved it. And so when you walked in to the Bronwyn Dodson Theater and you first saw the set, what was your first hit, your first impression?
My first hit was kind of, wow. Because this was actually the same theater that I saw Directors Fest in, and that was in a black box theater, so this isn't your Broadway type, big stage and big proscenium, and it goes back. This is a tiny little, it's a room of decent size, but they've sort of got a stage, a performing area shoehorned into one corner, and then there's seats that sort of surround that, almost like a half theater in the round, you could say.
3/4 thrust is what the technical term is.
Okay, there you are. Yeah. And that's why I have theater friends. But suffice to say, my first impression of this theater from Directors Fest was this is a tiny little black room that props are constantly being brought in and out of. So when I first saw what you did with the space and how big this set was, I was like, wow, this was an accomplishment. I had no idea you could do something like that in this theater.
Chuck and Kevin, Chuck has ideas, and then I've seen Kevin throw sets together that just wow me every single time. So I was very, very impressed, and also to be a part of building and painting that thing is also a joy and a privilege that I was happy to pick up a brush and start throwing things onto it. So your overall impression of the story, without giving any of your plot points, just how it made you feel from beginning to end as an audience member.
It caught my interest, and it is a very intricate story, and the details escape me. But I was always very struck by the characters. This is what I would say has a Pixar cast. Sort of a term I throw onto anything that's got a very nice, wide, varied set of characters. I mean, if you look at a lot of Pixar films like Toy Story or Cars or Bug's Life, they're sort of your main characters, and there's just that big eclectic group of kind of background characters that make for a very nice, well-rounded ensemble cast. And I feel like that's very much how Judas Iscariot was, with like all the historical characters that I mentioned earlier. You've got a very nice set of personalities, big personalities, little personalities, and funny personalities. Mother Teresa, who could barely hear out of her little earphone, and it was really fun. I think that was really one of the big things that struck me of the show and the story itself is it brought in all these people that really kept your interest going throughout the entire performance.
The show was written in 2005, I believe, and being as contemporary as it was, how did the very current language hit you? Did it add? Was it appropriate, or did you think it was much? And or did you not even think about the language, and how kind of coarse it could be? At times?
How profane it could be. That was a surprise and a shocker. But at the same time, you already know this is going to be different. Looking at the set. It's kind of modern. It's more of a modern take on things. So it invites you to kind of consider different perspectives of how these characters were, or how they might have been. Sometimes we kind of sugarcoat history, and I'm always surprised when I maybe hear an F-bomb in a 40s context. I'm like, wow, they had that work back then, but it's been around.
I think it's from Act 2. Fabiana says, well, I guess that's what they mean by calling history a lie agreed to. Interesting that you would say not realizing or thinking about these characters in that light.
Sure.
So, did you laugh?
I think I did.
You think you did? Because I mean, some people think it's a hilarious show. Some people don't laugh at all. So
Sure.
I mean, were there points that were funny to you?
Oh, definitely. I mean, I didn't laugh at everything. There were of course some points where people laughed, and I'm like, oh, well, I don't know if it's that funny. But with all the big characters that you had and all the personalities, it's hard not to laugh. I mean, I think when you you asked me if I laughed, the first thing I thought of was when you smashed your glasses with the gavel. And my first thought would be, oh, the glasses. Gosh, does he have to get another pair now? Which you did.
My other glasses. Hey, there's the voice.
Oh, yeah, you got it back.
I couldn't find it for a while. All right, it's hidden in the gavel or something.
Yeah. But it was hilarious.
With the hilarity. Thank you. That's a compliment. With the hilarity, how did you enjoy or disenjoy the profound dramatic pieces of like the ending and where it got really heavy?
Sure, which I think is good. And again, to bring up Pixar, I remember at one point, I think it was Andrew Stanton who directed Finding Nemo, quoted, people always think comedy is the hardest bit of writing a story, and really it's the easiest. Those moments often just sort of come out of the characters. It's really finding heart that is the hardest part, and that is that was very well done towards the end, where you sort of the comedy is done and over, and you get to a more serious, somber note where you see just how much Jesus cares for Judas, which is the core of the story, and I think hits a lot of core religious, philosophical themes as well. That really helps that show to end on a high note, a memorable note, and really got the audience clapping and excited for the show.
Got my singer crying. Like
really?
Oh, I saw her after the show, and I wanted to catch her quickly because I knew she had to go to work. But then she saw me and she said, "I was supposed to clean up before I saw you," and I just felt,
mascara. No.
Well, also there was a point where my character's frozen in the show, and there were points where I was basically not like a ghost, but I mean viewing a scene because I wasn't there to these people, like when Judas and Jesus are having their scene, and
sure,
I start getting teary-eyed myself, even though I'm frozen on stage. And there were points even where I have this kind of explosion where it was just a little bit for me, but I can feel myself just getting, there's a very tense scene. And another question, it feels so weird being one of the actors.
I know, right? You're loaded with them.
Were there any characters that really stuck with you or stood out in your mind, or did you really feel like this entire stage was shared with equal energy by the entire cast?
I think it was definitely shared with equal energy, and obviously you have your main characters such as yourself and Judas and Cunningham, and
because I don't think of Littlefield as such a well, he's a judge, but go on.
Maybe not a protagonist, but he is prominent. He is one of the characters that is there for almost the entire show, as opposed to other characters who float in and out. And again, every character brings something different, and every character has this wonderful sort of energy and life to them. And I do think, I think there was this nice shared energy between everybody.
Well, thank you, and I'm glad, because that's the way I felt. I mean, knowing the show, it's very easy for a couple of characters to be show stealers, and because of just certain beautiful lines they get, or if you get the right actor, who just loves the spotlight.
Well, and to jump on that, you did have Satan, who was very, very well portrayed. He was very, very likable, which we don't like to say, but he was. And I think that's how the devil really is. But yeah, he was very easy to like, and he was up there for quite a bit, and I think he stuck in our minds a lot. So you do have a few characters like that, but they're not such show stealers that they really tip the balance, and that's all we think about. Oh yeah, Satan was great. Everybody else, I don't know. There was a nice balance again between all the sort of personalities and the energy, and how the chemistry formed between the characters.
Interestingly enough, thank you. Again, I keep saying thank you because but interestingly enough,
you're welcome.
You like me. You really like me. Interestingly enough, if I were to lend you the script, I could actually show you which roles were supposed to be double cast. Which would have made a smaller cast. But I'm really happy with every single person that we have in the show, because what each of them brought would have been lost had we doubled up on some roles. And we did lose a couple people on the way, but I think it just ended up being still the perfect kind of cast. I suppose usually we talk about lighting and all sort of thing, but I think my last question really is going to be, would you recommend this to someone else, especially knowing if they have very strong religious backgrounds and opinions? And
I think it would depend, because, well, artistically, yes, I would recommend this to someone on terms of artistic merit. It's very well artistically done. You guys did a terrific job. You had a good cast, like you said. And, the content is sort of a big thing. That was a consideration I had to make. And while sort of the semantics and the more religious, philosophical aspects escape me, because I'd have to see the show several times to pick those up. There are times where you're like, well, this doesn't handle religious matters as delicately as some people might like to. So, yeah, there is room for some people to be offended. So I think I would have to take that into consideration before recommending it to someone. And, somebody who's seen it without recommendation would have to take that into consideration as well. So to answer your question, maybe.
I just want to say I love their costumes.
Yeah, yes,
absolutely. Because that's a big part of my instruction at school and working so close with Mela, and seeing nobody else do costumes the way that she does. Especially when I saw pictures of the judge in the past, and I was like, oh, if he's just in a judge's robe. And then when her and Chuck actually put me in the
kind of the code,
the Civil War Confederate outfit, I was so jazzed. I was so happy.
Which was a good choice, because it gave you a sense of time and place.
Yeah,
that I don't think a judge's robes would have given.
And I don't think it's written that way, and it never says anywhere in this script. It says when he died, but it never says how he's supposed to look. And I'm glad that they went that way, and I'm also glad they went with a pilot looking as modern military as he did. He was
also great. Yeah.
He joined a little later too, because I think we lost the guy who was supposed to play him.
Oh, wow.
And he was doing noises off, and then he stepped in and was like, hey, and just sort of this fuse lit, all of a sudden in him, and he was great. And him and I would talk, often, and he'd be like, so this is what happens to the outfit, huh? I'm like, that's it. And I also had some time with Satan to sit and talk and just kind of reflect on the show.
Yeah.
Behind the scenes stuff, him and I would do like Expendables versions of our lines, with Arnold and Sylvester. But anyways, as I was going to say, very nice compliment from Chuck was on our first dress rehearsal. It's not uncommon that when an actor wears their costume for the first time, we get dumb. We just get kind of like, oh, and we don't, the costume wears you, and you don't wear the costume. But we handled that first rehearsal seamlessly with the first dress, with the costumes and everything. And Chuck told us afterwards, he says, I was very surprised. He says, at how not dumb we all were. And immediately everybody, because they've all in shows before, we were like, wow, thanks. And then, then there's a laugh. But anyways, so I wanted to thank you for coming to the show, and I wanted to thank you all for watching, of course, this episode. So thanks for tuning in, and thank you, Mr. Steven, for the show, and we'll catch you next time.
Definitely. Hey guys, if you have a question or a comment for Michael or myself, you can reach us at tmi.art.productions@gmail.com.
Turn off the dumb music, you crazy kids!